A 22-minute trip on a Staten Island ferry
Everybody back!
ends in disaster.
It sounded like a bomb exploded on the boat.
Everything was just completely wiped out.
Everyone that way.
Chaos and terror.
Am I looking for someone who might have set a bomb off?
Acts of selfless heroism.
We got somebody under here.
And a race to find the truth.
The pressure is always on.
Was it a terrorist attack?
Until one tip
The assistant captain said that.
breaks the case.
First time I've ever heard anything like that in any investigation.
Manhattan is a people magnet. It has a population of 1.5 million, and about 2 million more come to visit or work every weekday. Many of them travel via the Staten Island Ferry service. The fleet carries more than 60,000 passengers a day.
Staten Island Ferry, probably one of the most iconic symbols we have in not only New York, but probably in the United States. A big orange boat that floats back and forth, carrying thousands of people.
The trip across New York Harbor from Manhattan to Staten Island takes just 22 minutes. And the New York City's Department of Transportation keeps up to 5 ferries in service around the clock. Passengers ride for free and get to see the sights.
I had been taking the ferry since I was a little girl, and I love the ferry. You see all the tugs and the boats and the cruise ships and the Verrazano Bridge. It's great.
October 15th, 2003. The Andrew J. Barbary, one of the biggest ships in the Staten Island fleet, is getting ready to leave Manhattan's Whitehall terminal for its 3 o'clock sailing. Captain Michael Gansis is in charge.
Windy day.
His crew of 14 includes Richard Smith as assistant captain.
Visibility's perfect, though.
Smith, an experienced mariner himself, will be at the helm on this crossing.
There's a lot of responsibility that these captains and crew have to deal with. Is the responsibility of carrying human life on board.
The Barbary carries 6,000 passengers during peak times, but rush hour is just starting. On this trip, there are only about 1,500, the first wave of commuters heading home to Staten Island after work. Audrey Biazzi is one of them.
That early group that I was with were all the workers, the construction workers, because construction, starts so early.
It's barely 2 years since the World Trade Center was destroyed in a terrorist attack. And the city, with its altered skyline, is only starting to recover.
The whole downtown area was still a mess. We had a lot of scares going on, a lot of subway scares. It was a very, very difficult time to be in New York.
Hey, Frankie. Want to find a seat?
Electrician Henry Benedritti is a seasoned regular on this route.
I took the ferry every day, Monday through Friday, I'd say, for years. And you see the same people daily, but there was never any acknowledgement of seeing each other every day, not even the nod of a head.
But today, among the hundreds of other passengers, Henry's bumped into an old friend he hasn't seen in years.
I knew Frankie Sullivan for a long time. He was an apprentice when I first met him. Frankie was just gonna be married 20 years. It was just gonna be his 20th anniversary. And he was one of the nicest guys you wanna know.
I'm heading to the other side. She's all yours.
Got it. See you shortly.
Once it leaves Manhattan, the Barbary will navigate around Governor's Island and then head southwest to the St. George Terminal on Staten Island. The Andrew Barbary travels back and forth between the two terminals all day long, but it never has to turn around. The ferry is completely symmetrical. It even has 2 identical pilot houses, one on each end of the ship. Assistant Captain Smith is commanding from the Staten Island pilot house. For the trip back, the Manhattan end will become the front of the ship, and Captain Gansas will take control. Once the passenger decks have been secured, a deckhand comes up to serve as a lookout, an extra pair of eyes to scan the harbor.
New York's one of the busiest ports on the East Coast. It's a very, very busy port with commercial traffic, so you need to be on top of that.
Any traffic? All clear.
A lookout is a person that is supposed to be exactly what it says, looking out and making sure that the vessel stays out of harm's way.
That's full ahead.
Down below, the chief engineer keeps an eye on the engines. 7 minutes into the voyage, the assistant captain takes the ferry past the route's most famous landmark, the Statue of Liberty.
The Statue of Liberty, you can't get any closer than that unless you go exactly to the Statue of Liberty, so it's beautiful.
Like many of the regular commuters on board, Audrey Biazzi relaxes into her routine.
I like to sit by the beam so that I could sleep. I could lean against it and nod for 20 minutes.
Police officer John Downey lives and works on Staten Island. It's unusual for him to be crossing the harbor during the week.
I was testifying on a search warrant in Manhattan criminal court, and I decided to take the ferry back to Staten Island because I wanted to get back, to my command and head home that day.
The Barbary is now roughly halfway through its voyage. The senior mate comes up to the pilot house. It's his job to supervise the deckhands while they help the passengers get on and off. Now that the ferry's underway, he can breathe a little easier.
How'd it go? No problem.
15 minutes in.
Approaching the KV buoy, Jersey side. Yeah, got it.
The KV buoy marks the entry into the Kill Van Kull Channel and the approach to the Staten Island Ferry terminal.
That's when the vessel should be slowing down and they're going to make the approach into the slip and time to go home.
A few minutes from now, when they approach the terminal, the ferry will have to pull into one of the narrow slips. On a windy day like today, that will take some especially deft maneuvering. The gap is barely wider than the ship.
Can be very, very tricky, depending on where the wind's from, where's the wave action from, what the current's doing, and also other traffic that may be interfering with you.
Okay, I'm heading down to my mooring station. Great. See you later.
The deckhand needs to be ready to let the passengers off when the ferry docks.
Docking and undocking is going to be the busiest time. They're going to have to make sure that the passengers are keeping safe and not getting in harm's way. People are now either waking up from their sleep or putting their cell phones away or getting ready to disembark the vessel.
It's like a sixth sense, okay, it's time for you to go toward the front, so you're not in that madness trying to get off.
The ferry should be approaching the slip by now, but it's not.
And we started to walk to the front of the boat. But the odd thing was, this guy was running by toward the back of the boat, passing us. I thought that was odd.
When it shifts and slows up, you know you're coming in. And it never slowed up.
I couldn't figure out why it wasn't slowing down. And then as we were getting closer, it seemed like it was picking up more speed.
The ferry shows no sign of stopping.
Everybody back! Everybody back!
And I flew. We all flew.
like a bomb exploded on the boat.
The sound of the metal, the clanging, steel screams. It's such a high-pitched kind of sound. And then it went completely quiet.
The vessel has ground to a stop alongside a concrete maintenance pier, with its side torn wide open. Dozens on board are injured. The emergency has just begun. The inside of the stricken Staten Island Ferry looks like a war zone.
Next thing you know, you hear people yelling and screaming, you know, it's complete chaos.
There are hundreds of panicked people aboard the Barbary. Few have any idea what just happened.
All right, that way. Get to the other side. Move this way.
Police officer John Downey was with the NYPD when the World Trade Center was attacked. And that traumatic event was barely 2 years earlier.
And your mind races, all right, you know, this is happening again. My first thought was that maybe someone tried to, you know, blow up the boat. At that point, you have to pretty much figure out, am I looking for someone who might have set a bomb off? There's people running all over the place, and as they're running away from the disaster, you're running into it.
On shore, off-duty firefighter Peter Blake also tries to figure out what just happened.
When I turned and saw the boat on the construction pier there, I figured they detonated something on the boat.
The maintenance pier the ferry has hit is hundreds of meters south of the slips where it was supposed to dock. Blake jumps into action.
As a fireman, you want to get there and you want to help.
Gansas
I'm gonna go see what's happening.
and the chief engineer both rush to find out what's going on.
Help, please! Help me!
Audrey Biasi is pinned down by debris on one of the passenger decks. She's badly hurt.
I'm bore crushed, and I can't move. I didn't know that we had crashed. I thought they blew up the front of the boat.
Somebody, can you hear me?
I thought, now I'm gonna drown, and this is how I'm going.
Henry Benedritti finds himself behind a collapsed stairway. There's no sign of his friend, Frank Sullivan.
I got hit in my leg with something that just came out of nowhere. I was able to wiggle my way out of where I was trapped. But I never saw Frankie. I thought Frankie was fine because he ran before me. I thought, he's gonna be fine.
This is Task Force Portable. I got a ferry crash in the pier with multiple injuries.
Officer Downey's instincts and training take over.
We're gonna need multiple ambulances at the terminal.
It was tag, you're it. You're the first line of defense from now until everybody gets to the dock.
What's going on? You, check damage on the main deck. Are you okay? Richie, are you okay?
Oh my God.
The injured passengers need help. For many, time is running out.
I need your help.
With the ferry's wrecked side against the maintenance pier, no one can get on or off the ship. Somehow, Captain Gansas has to get the ferry over to the slips so first responders can board.
We need to switch over the controls. You stay here. I'm heading over to the Manhattan side.
The captain's plan is to get his ship clear of the maintenance pier, turn it, and then dock it by its undamaged end. Off-duty firefighter Peter Blake is determined to get from the pier to the ferry, but it's too far to jump.
I was able to get a construction ladder that was left there, and I was able to bridge from the concrete pier to the boat. New York City Fire Department, we really look at ourselves as the last line of defense to try to save a life. I got some cuts going onto the boat.
Blake has crossed over into another world.
And the first person that I saw was deceased. I mean, some of the injuries, people lost their legs and their limbs. I mean, it was horrific injuries.
Captain Gansas is back in the Manhattan pilot house. but he can't start piloting yet.
Yes. Okay, I'm in position.
Transfer command now.
First, he and the engineer have to switch control over to that end of the ship.
You have the command.
Off-duty firefighter Peter Blake works his way through the passenger decks.
Hey, sir, all right, can you hear me?
Many of the victims can no longer be helped.
I was kind of like just trying to triage at that point to see like who's actually pinned and savable and who's obviously deceased.
I'm in here.
Blake finds Audrey Biasi still pinned under debris.
We got somebody under here. What's your name?
The next thing I hear is somebody saying, there's a woman under there, let's get her out.
We're just gonna move this off you, all right?
It was kind of by luck that I came across her. She was stuck under like a piece of the steel decking.
So listen, we're gonna need some leverage.
Okay, this is gonna work.
That'd be good, yeah.
But we were able to use actual parts of the decking itself as a leverage to actually pull it off of her to get her out of it.
Captain Ganses has got his ferry away from the pier and out into the harbor. Now he can attempt to turn it around.
They had to maneuver that vessel, not knowing if the propulsion on that end of the vessel had been damaged.
There are many injured people on board. Every minute could cost lives.
At that point, it just seems like time really stood still as far as trying to get back to the terminal.
A sea of rescuers has congregated, but they're powerless to do anything.
I mean, you can see where help is, but you need to get there. So you got to get this boat into the pier.
Nice and easy. Stand by the dock.
With the ferry safely in the slip, first responders can finally board. They race onto the ship to search for survivors. Investigators need to board too. What they find is worse than anything they could have expected. "20 minutes after hell has been unleashed on the Andrew J. Barbary, the ferry now sits securely docked by its undamaged end at the terminal on Staten Island. 2/3 of the walls and windows on one side of the main passenger deck have been obliterated. Behind them, fully halfway into the ship, everything has been demolished. More than 80 people are injured, 11 of them fatally.
Everybody around me was bleeding. I was the best of the critical because I didn't lose a limb. The angels put their wings out. That's how I felt, because there was so much debris and I didn't get crushed. I was so grateful.
The Coast Guard has already arrived at the scene, led by investigator Charles Cobb.
I remember the day very, very clearly. It's one of those things that you never forget.
With Cobb is assistant investigator Richard Gonzalez.
When we got to the vessel, and that's when we realized this is really, really bad.
The main passenger deck looks like it's been detonated.
The extent of the damage and the magnitude of death and injury, that did go through our minds as we got on there. Was it a terrorist attack?
The investigators quickly determine this was no act of terrorism, but they realized the general public could fear otherwise.
This is about 2 years after 9/11, so everybody was assuming some kind of a mass attack. It turned out equally as devastating.
Off-duty firefighter Peter Blake finally leaves the ship.
I stayed and operated for probably up to maybe 2 hours. I was then told, hey man, you need to get your shoulder looked at.
You didn't run into my buddy Frankie. He was ahead of me.
Electrician Henry Benedritti is taken to a hospital and goes home that same night.
People died that day. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, they started to talk about the names of the people. And the last name they said was Frank Sullivan. Frankie had 2 kids. A wife. He didn't make it.
The horrific event has shaken the entire city.
It's a terrible tragedy. People who were on their way home, all of a sudden taken from us.
The National Transportation Safety Board puts investigator Bob Ford on the case.
So 9/11, obviously, September 11th, 2001, and this is October 15th, 2003. Not much time had passed. A big accident in New York, that's going to be the first thing. Oh my God, we're getting attacked again.
They need to find the truth and get word out to the public as quickly as they can.
All right, what do you got for me so far?
Let me show you.
The NTSB and the Coast Guard will work closely together. The Staten Island ferries aren't equipped with voyage data recorders, so there's no audio record of what was said in the pilot house. And no onshore security cameras captured the moment of impact.
That's a lot of damage.
So the key evidence investigators have is the mangled ferry itself.
The impact tore a gash about 200 feet long.
The severity of this accident, we couldn't figure out how it happened. It looked like the knife had been taken to the vessel from one side to the other.
50 feet deep into that thing, everything was just completely wiped out from the outside of the vessel till the midline of the vessel.
To try and understand the extreme damage inflicted on the ferry, investigators focus on the maintenance pier it collided with.
This was a concrete pier that was elevated, sticking out into the water.
Where the vessel hit the dock happened to line up with the row of windows.
We're talking about concrete against metal.
Riding into the corner of the pier, the Andrew Barberi didn't stand a chance.
The pier just sliced it, and it basically cut it open like a tuna can down the side. The only reason it didn't sink was because of where the damage was, way above the waterline.
Had this been below the waterline, people might have drowned.
The crash could have resulted in hundreds of fatalities. Investigators want to interview all 15 crew members, especially the captain and assistant captain assigned to be in the pilot house during docking.
Does he understand how serious this matter is?
Right away,
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
they're hitting roadblocks.
The captain won't meet with us.
The captain, he's taken the Fifth Amendment. He's not talking.
The United States Fifth Amendment allows any person under investigation to keep silent if they fear what they say could be used against them in court.
He lawyered up and that was it.
Investigators know it was Assistant Captain Smith who was actually on the controls when the ferry crashed.
We definitely wanted to talk to the assistant captain.
But in a stunning turn of events that shocks everyone, it's impossible to interview him.
Police say one of the ferry captains, Richard Smith, fled the scene and ran home, where he shot himself with a pellet gun and slashed his wrists. He came out of his house on a stretcher in front of neighbors and is now in the hospital.
After life-saving surgery, Smith is still in no condition to talk to investigators.
I just couldn't believe it. It was the first time I've ever heard anything like that in any investigation. At this point now I'm thinking, why would he try to commit suicide? Whether he did this purposefully, or he made an error and he feels so guilty that he made an error. So we don't know. We just have to keep going on the investigation.
It's hard for investigators to understand how a qualified officer could mistakenly drive full speed into a pier in broad daylight.
Everybody back!
Why would the ferry not even slow down before the crash? If there's a mechanical issue with the Staten Island fleet that could have led to this disaster, investigators need to find it.
You always think of the mechanical problems that could happen. You could have a steering casualty, you could have an engine casualty. You don't make assumptions.
The Andrew J. Barberi is 22 years old, a workhorse that's made tens of thousands of crossings. A failure is possible.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Knowing that the Barberry's powerful propulsion system could be malfunctioning, investigators tie the vessel securely to a dock, then put it through a battery of tests.
Okay, go ahead.
That was the main thing we thought this might have been, that this was a mechanical issue, that the propulsion system got stuck and pushed the vessel forward without being able to stop.
Going to full power.
Everything seems to be functioning perfectly.
Okay, shut him down.
Copy that, shutting down.
The mechanics of the vessel, the propulsion was working.
At the end of the day, it was determined that all systems were operating properly. I mean, that was ruled out probably on day 3. And so, what happened?
Investigators need a new lead, but the assistant captain is still in the hospital, unavailable to talk.
Okay, thanks.
And the captain isn't talking either, on his lawyer's advice.
I never talked to the captain, and he kept giving the same answer. Based on advice from counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment right.
Next in the hierarchy is the senior mate. He was in the back of the pilot house when the ferry crashed.
Gentlemen, thank you for your patience.
If he'll talk, investigators hope he can shed light onto why a routine trip for 1,500 commuters came to such a horrific end.
Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
All right, walk us through. Where were you and what did you see?
The senior mate of the Andrew J. Barberry was right there when the ferry rammed a maintenance pier, killing 11 people and injuring dozens more.
I guess I got to the pilot house about halfway through the trip.
The senior mate is usually patrolling the passenger decks while the ship is underway. But after the start of this trip,
How'd it go? No problem.
he was on a bench at the back of the pilot house.
It was a regular day and nothing out of the ordinary.
He wasn't on lookout duty, but because he was upstairs, he's able to tell investigators something about what happened.
Okay, I'm heading down to my mooring station.
Great. See you later.
Toward the end of the voyage, the deckhand returned to the lower decks as required, but no one came up to take over as lookout.
It was contrary to the Coast Guard regulations of having 2 people in the wheelhouse from time of departure till time of arrival. But procedures were not tightly regulated by the Staten Island Ferry operations.
So who was in the pilot house?
Just the 2 of us.
You and the assistant captain?
Yes, sir.
The protocol is the captain and the assistant captain should be on the controls as they make the approach to the dock.
But Gansas wasn't in the Staten Island pilot house. He should have been with Assistant Captain Smith during the docking, but he wasn't.
It became clear that there was a disconnect between policies and procedures and actual operations of the vessel.
Investigators learned some captains would stay at the other end of the ferry and wait there to take the helm for the return trip.
It operated that way for years, and they'd had no major problems, so clearly it was working for them in their mind.
They basically just said, hey, you take this side, I'll take that side. What can go wrong?
The assistant captain was left alone at the helm, piloting a ship with 1,500 passengers on board. And from where the senior mate was sitting, he couldn't see well enough to help.
I don't really know what happened. It just... nothing out of the ordinary, and then... bang.
What's going on? You check damage on the main deck.
The senior mate was quickly sent to help deal with the emergency, so he doesn't know what happened in the pilot house after that.
Well, I appreciate your time.
Investigators have gotten a glimpse into the flawed day-to-day operations on the Staten Island ferries.
Thank you again.
But they still don't understand why an assistant captain with years of experience would sail right past the slip and ram the ferry into a pier.
We're stuck with paperwork, I'm afraid.
Human factors specialist Barry Strouch is brought in on the case. His particular experience makes him uniquely qualified.
I had personally worked on 2 accidents on large transport systems that were later determined to be mass homicides. It's a natural question. The assistant captain did not alter the course of the vessel, did not slow the speed. Was he suicidal in any way?
Strouch looks into the 55-year-old assistant captain's records. He discovers Smith has an impeccable reputation. His annual performance reviews are all rated superior or outstanding.
It's impressive.
Every person we talked to, his records showed a diligent, motivated employee who liked his job and liked his life.
How was life on the oil rigs?
A lot worse than this. The winds were just vicious.
When investigators interview Smith's colleagues and family, they find no suggestion Smith was suicidal before the crash. Strouch concludes Smith's suicide attempt was likely caused by distress after the accident.
This assistant captain was so distraught by what he felt was his responsibility for the accident that he attempted suicide as a way of reacting to his feeling of remorse.
But if he didn't ram the pier deliberately, what did happen? Investigators need to know more about Smith's actions before he fled the ship. There's someone else who saw him after the crash.
The engineer talked to him right after.
Stay here. I'm gonna go see what's happening. Okay.
The chief engineer was one of the last people to talk to Smith before he disappeared that day.
So go ahead.
It was right after we hit.
He shares a critical detail.
He said he blacked out or passed out.
The assistant captain said that.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
What happened?
I think I passed out.
Well, he said I blacked out or I passed out.
Did he fall asleep? Was it a medical condition? Did he have a stroke?
Investigators have urgent questions that need answers.
We started saying, why would he black out?
Investigators are faced with a startling revelation. The assistant captain of the Andrew Barbary may have blacked out moments before the fatal crash.
We needed to find out why he had the event, what caused it, and that just got the chain going.
They want to talk to him more than ever, but they can't.
After his hospital stay, his lawyer recommended that he not speak to us, and we were never able to actually interview the assistant captain.
With no lead from Smith himself, investigators must consider every possible scenario for why he would have blacked out.
Alcohol tests?
Drug and alcohol, the pressure is always on. So you don't rule it out until you can start getting your facts in place.
Investigators have the results of a blood test done on the assistant captain when he was taken to the hospital.
Negative. Test came back clean.
Investigators turn to the ferry crew's work schedule. Shifts are typically 8 hours long, but intensive.
The Staten Island Ferry, for each shift, they pretty much ran on a 30-minute schedule, and they would run nonstop until the shift ended.
Could Assistant Captain Smith have been so tired that he lost consciousness at the worst possible moment?
In order for that to happen, the person has to be basically exhausted. In other words, it's someone who is that tired that he or she can't control himself or herself to stay awake.
How was life on the oil rigs?
A lot worse than this.
The deckhand serving as lookout said Smith seemed normal just minutes before the crash.
Okay, I'm heading down to my mooring station.
Great. See you later.
Interviews with family back that up.
His wife says sleep schedule is normal.
We've ruled out fatigue
from what we learned about his sleep-wake patterns and his work schedule.
Okay. How are we doing on his medical records?
Because of the fact that he had what he described as passed out on the vessel, we needed to get as many medical records as we can.
I've got his Coast Guard forms right here.
There's always the possibility that a heart attack or stroke or something else causes the incapacitation.
Investigators scrutinized Smith's medical records, starting with his 719K. This boilerplate form is a safeguard created by the Coast Guard itself to ensure seafarers are healthy and physically fit for duty.
The 719K specifies all medical conditions that the individual has or medication that they're taking, and it's signed by the physician certifying that the person is qualified to hold a license.
According to Smith's 719K, he's in excellent health. None of the records Strouch has seen explain why the assistant captain might have blacked out at the controls.
There's got to be more.
Strouch is determined to keep digging.
More than likely, there was other information out there that would be able to help us answer that question as to what happened on the ferry. We had to rule everything out.
He thinks of a way to look beyond the 719K and maybe get closer to the truth.
I took a guess that the pharmacies would tell us something, and I was prepared to go to every local pharmacy near where the assistant captain lived and just ask them if they had information about medications that they dispensed to the assistant captain.
Investigators visit a pharmacy near Smith's home and hit the jackpot.
There's another one. This one's a painkiller.
Smith was on a cocktail of prescriptions for a variety of conditions.
The assistant captain had been on prescription medication for several years, which he had not reported to the Coast Guard.
For Strouch, it's a shocking revelation.
That's quite the list.
To navigate a ferry with a capacity of several thousand people through one of the busiest harbors in the world required alertness at all times, quick reaction time, the ability to sustain attention, and the ability to distinguish between what's relevant in the environment and what is irrelevant, to focus. The assistant captain had been taking prescription pain medications for chronic back pain. And he'd been taking that for at least several months. And he continued to maintain his work schedule.
One of the pain medications Smith has been taking is tramadol, a drug with a concerning list of side effects.
Dizziness, drowsiness,
And there it is.
blurred vision, fainting, seizures.
One of the potential side effects of tramadol is seizure. So it's very possible that the tramadol led to his incapacitation.
The whole point of the Coast Guard's 719K is to flag mariners at medical risk to protect the lives of passengers and crew. That didn't happen this time. Investigators need to find out why. The assistant captain who crashed the Andrew J. Barbary had a signed 719K form stating that he was healthy and fit to pilot a ship, and that he wasn't taking any medications. But investigators now know that wasn't true.
He was taking prescription medications that could cause all kinds of adverse effects, and nobody knew about it.
When investigators follow the paper trail, they make a surprising discovery.
The doctor that prescribed that medication was also the doctor that signed his Coast Guard 719K form, in which he attested that the assistant captain was not taking medication. I had never seen a case where a physician and a mariner together falsified a form.
I cannot for the life of me understand why a doctor would sign off, oh yeah, okay, I'll sign it off for the Coast Guard. That just absolutely bewildered me.
It's unbelievable.
That falsified medical form allowed Smith to renew his mariner's license without anyone taking a second glance. And it set the stage for a disaster. On the day of the crash, nobody knew Smith was at risk for any side effects. And the crew of the Andrew Barbary went about their business as usual.
I'm heading to the other side. It was all yours. Got it. See you shortly.
Captain Gansas was never in the Staten Island pilot house after the Barbary got underway. Worse, he didn't join Smith for the docking the way he was supposed to.
See you later.
As the ship neared the end of its journey, the deckhand also left to carry out his other duties. No one came to replace him, leaving Assistant Captain Smith alone at the helm from that point on. In the final minutes before the ship was supposed to dock, Smith likely blacked out, perhaps overcome by the effects of his prescription medications.
Had Captain Gansas been on the pilot house, or if they had a active lookout, he would have been able to see that Captain Smith had passed out on the controls and taken action.
Incapacitated, Smith sailed the ferry right past the terminal at cruising speed. No one suspected anything.
What are we gonna do?
Until it was too late.
What the?
Serious flaws in the system allowed this horrific disaster to happen. The work investigators did in uncovering them have resulted in much-needed change.
There was a major shakedown in the ferry operations in Staten Island that hopefully will prevent this from happening again.
They made enormous improvements in the safety of the operations. They make sure always that there are 2 licensed mariners in the pilot house during all phases of the operation.
As a result of the NTSB's report, the Coast Guard toughens its regulations to help ensure crews are fit for work.
New rules were implemented regarding overall health, everything from sleep apnea to being obese. Now, merchant mariners are required to maintain a certain level of physical fitness and readiness.
The report also recommends that the Coast Guard overhaul the way they analyze and track mariners' health to make it harder for people to get around the regulations.
The NTSB, a lot of times they do issue pretty harsh recommendations, but it is an eye-opener sometimes.
At the end of the day, what the Coast Guard wants is safety at sea.
In the courts, Assistant Captain Smith pleads guilty to 11 counts of seaman's manslaughter and to lying on his Coast Guard medical report. He receives an 18-month prison sentence. Smith's physician is put on probation for 1 year. Captain Gansas loses his job, ending his career as a mariner. The Department of Transportation is also faulted for poor oversight of their ferries, and the Director of Ferry Operations is sentenced to prison for 1 year plus a day for seaman's manslaughter. October 15, 2003, was a day that took the lives of 11 people and forever changed the lives of many others, including Audrey Biasi.
It was like changing a channel. I was living one life, and then somebody changed the channel, and that life was over with. But I was grateful I was alive.
Henry Benedritti lives with the loss of his friend, Frank Sullivan.
I hope Frankie's resting in peace. And I hope that his children and his wife have been able to move forward even in the eyes of this tragedy. You know, he was one of the good guys. He really was.
John Downey is inducted into the NYPD's Honor Legion for his actions that day.
When you're a cop, you're kind of on duty 24/7. I didn't do anything different than any other New York City cop would have did that day.
Firefighter Peter Blaich is now retired, but he hasn't left the Andrew J. Barbary behind.
And a crazy way. It unites us all. It's sad, right? Because it takes something like a 9/11 or a ferry crash to bring us all together and forget about all the day in and day out nonsense and say, okay, we're all human and we all care about each other and we're all trying to just save each other.